It happened approximately 74,000 years ago, long before writing, agriculture, or cities, yet powerful enough to shape the fate of every human alive today. On the island we now call Sumatra, beneath the waters of modern Lake Toba, a colossal reservoir of magma had been rising slowly toward the surface. For tens of thousands of years, pressure built inside this chamber, pressure so immense that when it finally broke through the crust, the earth did not tremble, it ruptured. The supervolcano that erupted at Toba was not a mountain exploding, it was the collapse of an entire landscape. The eruption expelled more than 2,800 cubic kilometers of volcanic material, hurling ash into the sky with a violence unmatched in the time of our species. The plume punched into the stratosphere in minutes, towering nearly 50 kilometers above the earth. Rivers flash-boiled. Forests ignited and were then instantly erased by pyroclastic flows racing faster than storms. The sound could have traveled across oceans, a roar carried along the curvature of the planet. Within hours, skies over Southeast Asia went black. But within days, the effects began to reach Africa, where early Homo sapiens lived in scattered bands along the Rift Valley lakes of Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania. It was here, thousands of kilometers from the eruption, that humanity would face its greatest trial. The first warning came with the light. Dawn, which should have arrived golden and sharp over the savannas, emerged instead as a dull, rust-colored glow. Hunters paused in mid-stride, narrowing their eyes at the strange haze hanging over the horizon. It wasn't smoke. There was no smell, no taste, but it muted the sun's warmth, turning the morning into a pale imitation of itself. Over the next days, the dimming grew unmistakable. The world seemed drained of color. Shadows became soft, indistinct. The warmth that had defined equatorial Africa for millions of years began to fade as though the sun itself had retreated. Then the ash arrived. It did not fall like snow. It fell like dust, silent, fine, gray. It settled on the surfaces of leaves, coated streams, clung to footprints. Children brushed it from their hair. Hunters wiped it from their eyes and tasted minerals on their tongues. The air held a strange heaviness. To early humans, it must have felt like the world had changed its mind about supporting life. The real catastrophe was not what fell to the ground, but what rose into the sky. Toba had released staggering quantities of sulfuric aerosols, particles so reflective that they formed a thin, bright veil around the entire planet. Sunlight, the fundamental engine of all ecosystems, was abruptly reduced. And when sunlight falters, everything falters. Temperatures dropped sharply. Plants, deprived of full light, weakened. Grasslands, the foundation of Africa's great food web, withered to a muted brown. Herbivores wandered farther and farther in search of viable grazing. Predators followed them thin and desperate. Rivers ran colder. Rain patterns shifted unpredictably, destroying the seasonal rhythms that life depended on. This was the beginning of the volcanic winter, a climatic event that would last 6 to 10 years at full intensity and create long-term instability for centuries after. For the early humans living across Africa, this winter was nothing like a modern cold season. It was a slow suffocation of the environment. Food grew scarce. Game animals vanished from familiar routes. Even insects changed their behaviors or died off entirely.
The world became inhospitable in ways that no previous generation had experienced. Human populations began to crash. Genetic evidence today indicates that during this period, the global population of Homo sapiens may have dropped to 5,000 to 20,000 total individuals, the size of a small town scattered across an entire continent. Some models estimate a mortality rate of 60 to 90%, though the exact number remains debated. What is certain is that humanity came dangerously close to disappearing. Yet, even in this global collapse, pockets of survival remained. Scientists call them refugia, regions where natural conditions buffered communities from the worst effects of the cooling. One such refuge was the East African Rift Valley, where deep lakes and sheltered valleys provided microclimates that stayed warmer than surrounding regions. Human groups living here could still access fish, shellfish, and plant resources buried beneath layers of ash. Another refuge lay along the southern African coast, where marine ecosystems remained stable despite atmospheric dimming. Shellfish beds, tidal pools, and coastal foraging sites offered reliable food at a time when inland regions starved. In these zones, small human bands dug deep into strategies that had always existed, but now became essential: cooperation, food sharing, fire management, and long-distance planning. Imagine a clan living near what is now Lake Turkana during the darkest year of the volcanic winter. The air holds a constant chill. The sun shines weakly, as though half extinguished. Grasslands stretch out in a lifeless gray. Hunters return empty-handed more often than not. Every meal is deliberate, every decision urgent. To survive, they adapt. They follow the migrations of the last remaining herds into sheltered valleys and river corridors. They craft finer stone blades to extract every possible calorie from bones and carcasses. They gather bulbs, nuts, and roots hidden beneath ash layers. They rely on fire not only for cooking, but for warmth and protection, tending flames with ritual care. At night, the world is unnervingly dark, a lunar coldness where even the stars seem dimmed behind the haze. Families huddle together, not only for warmth, but for reassurance. The elders speak of a time when the world was brighter, warmer, more predictable. The young listen with disbelief, unable to imagine such abundance. Along the southern coast, other groups walk the tidal line each morning, harvesting shellfish and small marine animals at low tide. These coastal humans likely had one of the highest survival rates during the bottleneck. The ocean became their anchor, unmoved by the chaos on land, a stable provider when everything else failed. Over years, the veil of volcanic particles in the stratosphere slowly began to thin. Sunlight strengthened. Temperatures climbed. The grasslands returned in patches. Animals reappeared along ancient migration paths. Rivers regained their ecosystems. The sky gradually reclaimed its color. It was not a fast recovery, but it was a recovery. And the humans who survived emerged changed. Reduced in numbers, but sharpened in adaptability, they carried the lessons of the volcanic winter in their behaviors and in their genes. Their descendants would become the first wave of humans to leave Africa for the Arabian Peninsula, then spread across Asia, Europe, and eventually the entire world. The eruption of Toba, in Sumatra, approximately 74,000 years ago, did not wipe out humanity, but it shrank it, reshaped it, refined it. It forced cooperation, ingenuity, resourcefulness, and resilience at a scale previously unimaginable. Humanity walked through a darkness that lasted years, and a cold that lasted centuries, and emerged on the other side transformed. Every living person today descends from the small, scattered groups who survived that long winter. They endured the eruption that almost erased us, and because they did, we are here.